Sednaya represents one of the most striking symbols of repression in Syria, where political interests, religious tensions, and horrifying treatment of prisoners intersect. Despite the widespread fear surrounding its prisoners, its operation has remained almost unchanged. Today, thousands of prisoners are reportedly held there, facing torture and inhumane conditions without access to justice. Let us know your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to give us a like and subscribe for more videos. The exact number of prisoners in Sednaya is difficult to determine, but it is estimated that the facility's capacity is around 10,000 places. Most of these prisoners are men, but since 2011, women and minors have also been detained, often for trivial reasons such as suspicion of dissent against the regime. These individuals are subjected to systematic torture, including beatings, electric shocks, rape, and other methods of cruel treatment. The religious aspect of the prison system is also significant. Since the Assad regime is led by Alawites, most of the prisoners are Sunnis, suspected of links to Islamist groups or simply of supporting anti-government sentiments. This religious conflict adds another tragic layer to the prison, where people are not only punished for their political orientation, but also for their religion. All this leads to inhumane and degrading treatment. The conditions in the prison are so brutal that many die from starvation, disease, or as a result of torture. Survivors describe being forced to exist in filthy, overcrowded cells without adequate access to food and water. Those who survive the torture and inhumane conditions often suffer from severe psychological disorders due to prolonged isolation and stress. Although international organizations and human rights groups continue to highlight the horrific practices in Sednaya, the Syrian regime continues to deny all accusations of human rights violations. Despite numerous reports of executions and systematic torture, Syrian authorities continue to block access to international observers in prisons. This approach by the regime turns prisons like Sednaya into closed zones where these atrocities occur. Sednaya is not just a prison. It has become a symbol of horror, political repression, and religious conflict that characterized the Syrian civil war. Everything that happens there is a silent reminder of how far regimes can go in suppressing opposition and maintaining distant power. Although the international community has long been pressuring Syria to improve conditions in this facility and allow access to independent inspectors, the regime of Bashar al-Assad continues to refuse transparency and obstructs attempts at investigation. Thousands of people who have suffered and are still suffering in these prisons are witnesses to an inhumane system that destroys not only their bodies, but also their spirits. Sednaya has thus become a tragic monument to modern Syria, where fear, violence, and brutality are everyday realities for those who find themselves there. Syria was a young man who was arrested in 2006 for founding a youth opposition group. After his arrest, he was taken to the infamous Sednaya prison, where he immediately experienced the horrors of the facility. Diab was placed in an overcrowded cell with no basic sanitary conditions. They slept on the floor next to each other with insufficient access to water and food. Every day became a struggle for survival, as starving prisoners also had to face diseases spreading due to filth and lack of medical care. Torture was part of the daily routine. Diab recalls constant beatings with iron rods, subjection to electric shocks, and other forms of cruel treatment. The aim of these methods was to extract false confessions to crimes that prisoners often did not commit. The psychological pressure was as cruel as the physical violence. Prisoners had to endure long hours in dark cells, harsh and often prolonged isolation. After 5 years in Sednaya, Syria was unexpectedly released in 2011 as part of a presidential amnesty. Physically exhausted and mentally broken, he returned home as a shattered man. However, his testimony about the horrors in Sednaya helped the world better understand the terrible things that happened in this prison. The Syrian civil war, which broke out in 2011, was one of the bloodiest conflicts of the 21st century and had profound impacts on the entire Middle East. Its roots lie in the authoritarian regime of Bashar al-Assad, which suppressed political opposition and imposed its rule with a heavy hand. What began as peaceful protests inspired by the Arab Spring quickly turned into a brutal civil war that tore the country apart and involved regional forces in the fighting. One of the key factors in the conflict is religion. Syria is a religiously and ethnically diverse country. The majority of the population are Sunnis, but the Alawites, a Shia sect to which President Assad belongs, hold key power positions. This religious divide became one of the main drivers of the conflict, with Assad's regime harshly suppressing Sunni uprisings and Islamist factions that opposed him. Some aspects of the conflict have shocked the world with their brutality. The regime of Bashar al-Assad has been accused of using chemical weapons against the civilian population, including the 2013 attack in Ghouta, which killed hundreds of people. The international community was horrified by the use of banned weapons, but direct military intervention was limited, allowing the conflict to continue. Another shocking aspect of the war is the involvement of foreign actors. Iran and Russia sided with Assad, while the United States, Turkey, and Arab states supported various factions of the Syrian opposition. The war thus became a proxy conflict, where regional and global powers pursued their interests at the expense of the Syrian population. The Syrian conflict is a prime example of how a combination of authoritarianism, religious tension, and geopolitical interests can lead to a complete breakdown and immeasurable human tragedy. Millions of people have been displaced, thousands have died, and the country has been left with deep social, economic, and cultural wounds that will take generations to heal. This conflict has shown how fragile the coexistence of different ethnic and religious groups in a country can be when power struggles take center stage. The collapse of the state, the arrival of foreign actors, and brutal repression against ordinary people have turned Syria into the scene of one of the worst humanitarian disasters in modern history. Let us know your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to give us a like and subscribe.